But lastly, before we go into tea, we've got Mark Norris from Quedis and Julie Stead from Telefonica, who are going to talk to us about career development that inspires the workforce.
We actually wanted to practice doing the walk up the stairs after seeing Jennifer Lawrence fall at the Oscars, so it's like, do
Thankfully,
not fall on the stairs. So we've got about sort of 10, 15 minutes worth of content to go through, so that should sort of get us on track with the time. In terms of what we're going to cover in the next session, it's how you create a career development framework that really inspires your people. So you can have the most amazing tools, but how do you actually roll something out that really encourages engagement?
Really fell off.
Don't fall off, don't fall off. So just to introduce ourselves briefly, my name's Mark Norris. I'm from a company called Quedis, which is part of North Highland. And one of the things we specialise in is professionalising IT. And for us, that's about changing the way an organisation thinks, feels and does. So we break down professionalising into those components. Think is being really clear on where you want to head as an IT organisation, so your mission, your strategy. The feel is what it feels like to work in IT and to work with IT if you're in the business. And the do is the process and the governance you use.
Okay, and my name's Julie Stead. I'm the business manager in IT at Telefonica in the UK, and we've got about 400 people in IT in an operations organisation of around 1,500. And my role in this process was to actually embed a career development framework. So how do we take it to the people and actually make it different? And so that's what we'll be talking about today.
Good. Good. So in terms of what we're going to cover, so Julie's going to give a bit of the background. So what was the business problem? What were they trying to achieve? I'm then going to talk about some of the approach, and I'll just show you some of the tools we created so you get a real good feel for what those tools look like. And then we're going to talk about that inspiring rollout, so how we created Be Brilliant, that's the logo for it there. And then throughout, we're going to be coming back to those 4 nice little petals there, which are some of the guiding principles we use throughout. So these are some of the takeaways for how you actually do this effectively.
I'm going to stand here to keep in that line. So I guess the first thing for me was, what was the problem we were trying to address? Well, actually, our people do an employee satisfaction survey, like I'm sure most of your teams do. And they were telling us that they didn't actually think there was a career for them in IT anymore. They didn't think there was a career in Telefonica, actually. And they didn't really understand what the purpose of their job was. So they were all trying to do many different roles around the organisation without clear accountability for their own purpose in life. And from a business perspective, I think one of the other presenters said it actually, I'm not sure we knew what capability we'd got in the organisation. So we didn't know what architects we'd got. We didn't know what business analysis skills we'd got. And ultimately, why did we need to focus our training and development? I guess a major thing for me, we tried it before. We tried it about 4 years ago, and we'd written about 600 role descriptions at that point, gave them to a load of line managers and said, there you go, off you go and give those to your people. Well, actually, that didn't work either. So I think, for me, we've tried it, what can we do and how can we do it differently? The role profiles that we'd done at that point were really complicated. Nobody understood them. All we did was go into a bin. You asked them for the role profiles, they didn't have them. So I guess then, Mark and the guys at Quedis, we knew we needed somebody different. I couldn't do it, we couldn't do it as a team. We needed people that did this not as their day job. I think Tracy said that in her presentation. If you give it to people as a sideline, it doesn't get the focus. We knew that we'd done it before, it hadn't worked, so we asked the guys at Quedis to come in, run it as a discrete piece of work, help us actually embed it in a really short period of time. And I think that was about 4 months, wasn't it?
Just under 4 months, yeah.
So we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Good. So the first thing for us is to establish some agreed ways of working and just to get some guiding principles. And for us, if you don't get these right, you're going to get stuck in trying to work out decisions throughout the project. You won't know what the roles are. So the first point is a genuine partnership way of working. So it's not us coming in from outside telling Telefonica what to do. It's us providing some external insight. We've seen what good looks like in other organisations and bringing that to Telefonica in a joint team. And we actually had a core dedicated team. So we had some of Julie's team actually working with us at the same time, so aligned to us. And then we just brought in other subject matter experts from each of the roles as we needed them. So that meant we weren't doing it on top of their day job. We weren't giving them too much work to do. We were driving it in the background, but it still had a joint feel to it. Good. The other sort of guiding principle for me that I absolutely am passionate about is keep it simple. And I know we've spoken about that before today, but I cannot emphasize enough that the key to having this work, to me, is keeping it really simple. The temptations to go down into the detail, to worry so much about the intricacies, but if you keep it simple, it's going to be so much more effective and it's going to get embedded. The final thing, aligning with industry good practice. So obviously bringing SFIA from a skills framework, but also trying to bring in industry good practice role titles. So again, we had that conversation earlier this morning. So calling a BA, differentiating that from a systems analyst. When we started, and we touched on this a bit more, there were hundreds of different role titles, and it was just confusion everywhere.
Actually, I don't think we had any role descriptions in some areas, did we?
Yeah. So when we start, we always say, what role profiles do you have? We've got a load through, which I have to admit, even reading the title and the description of the role, I didn't know what that role was. And then others, it's just like, what's a role profile? I've not heard of one. So that was our starting point. So what we did then was to think about, from a user perspective, what is this going to look like and how's it going to feel for someone using the framework? So again, we've seen a lot of organizations jump straight into the job description, straight into the skills framework. The problem is you haven't thought about, from a user perspective, what do they want, what are they expecting to see, and how are they going to get their heads around it? So for us, we came up with this slide actually in the first week. So it had these 5 elements to it. So what are we trying to achieve? Where do I fit in? So the org charts, where do you fit into the organization? Your role profile and the skills, how you develop those skills and your career, so the career path. And then finally, linking it through to learning and development and performance management. So to us, if you don't make that final link, you're never going to get the full embedding of it. This actually then, as you can see, it's mocked up as a website. This became the website. So for an individual that works in IT in Telefonica, they go to this page now, and it's a one-stop shop for their career development. And again, for me, that's really important. You don't want some documents on SharePoint, some on the F drive, wherever they are. Keep it all in one place. Makes it so much easier. So, question for the group. Who has looked at their role profile in the last 2 months? Hands up. I would say that's maybe 10% of the people in here. So another passion we have at Credis is that we believe role profiles are absolutely essential for a period, but they actually, in reality, act as a stepping stone towards something else. So what an individual uses on a day-to-day to manage their career and their development is not their role profile. That's the anchor for it, but it's the things that build on that, and it's some of those we're just going to take you through now. So we are still going to touch on the role profile, because like I said, it's your starting point. First thing, like I say, we had 400 people in the IT department, 400 different job descriptions, if they had one at all. So our first job was, how do we get that down to an industry-aligned set of roles? So we took it from 400 to about 30 in the end, and these were things you'd recognize: a project manager, a business analyst, systems developer, all of those type of things. Next thing is being really clear, obviously, within those roles, who's accountable for what. And for us, I personally use the Grandma test. Some use the plain English test. At Telefonica, it's called the Sean Bean test. So if you remember Telefonica adverts, it used to be the voice of Sean Bean doing them. They were really clear, articulated really well, and they hit home. They were short and sweet. And that's their corporate language as well. So you live and breathe that brand internally within Telefonica. And I really love this. It kind of matches our own culture as well. They just talk straight, say it like it is. So the idea is you can pick up any role profile and you should be able to understand it, even if you're not an expert in that field. So I don't have a development background, but I can pick up the developer role profile and actually understand what that role is about. And to us, that's absolutely essential if you're talking about a career framework, because you want people to look at other roles and to understand what they are. So plain English, get rid of the jargon. That's the tip there. The other thing we've done is, so this first bit is around the accountabilities, which will look very familiar. And then we've had a lot of discussion today around the 4 sections of your role profile, and we did exactly the same thing. So your professional IT skills, your core business skills, so that could be leadership, management, communication, and so on. Any specific technical skills you need, and then any standards and certificates. So that could be Prince 2 or ITIL, something like that. So all in one page for the individual. For the BDI amongst you, you've probably noticed that this looks slightly different than you think from SFIA normally. So we have actually 1 to 7 groups into 4 categories. And also the name of those skills is actually the SFIA subcategories, not the specific SFIA skills themselves. And the reason we do this is going back to the keep it simple idea. So our feeling is it's much easier to learn a common language of 18 skills than it is to learn a common language of 96. particularly when you're starting off in an organisation that hasn't had SFIA before. So I think in the future you might want to build that up to 96, but we wanted to get everyone in the organisation talking about these 18 things. You can still find the SFIA skills that they link to. So you can still go back, for example, in project management, and see the underlying SFIA skills there. So that reference is still there, but it's just simplified for users. Again, with the levels, so instead of having 7 operating levels, we just grouped 1 and 2 together, 3 and 4 together, and so on. And again, it just really simplifies it. You could argue, is that enough differentiation? But at Telefonica, they had 4 levels of their business skills, so it just seemed to map really perfectly to have 4 levels of the technical skills as well. And we've done the same thing for different clients. So having this similarity between this and your business skills really, really helps. So an individual now knows what their role is, they know what skills they need, but how do they develop those skills? So this is where for each of these 18 professional skills, we have a learning and development catalogue, which shows you different options for developing each of those skills. And again, we had a lot of conversation this morning around training is not classroom-based training. Learning and development is much wider than that. And again, we believe this with a passion. And each of the rollout sessions that we'll talk about that we did, the first question I asked is, what was the best way of learning that you've ever had? And 9 out of 10 times, it was on-the-job learning or it was someone coaching me. So what we tried to do is we did include training courses. We included e-learning, different conferences you could go to. But we also just wanted to put people in touch with people. So for the core skills, we actually had owners for those skills. So someone you could go to find out about that particular skill. So an expert within the organisation to learn from as well. We also found that in Telefonica, there were so many options for developing your skills. It was amazing. I thought it was brilliant when I joined on. I didn't understand why the staff satisfaction survey said that L&D wasn't great. What we realised, though, the reason is there's too much out there and you couldn't navigate to what you needed. So bringing this together, relating it to your skills, was just a really easy way of finding what skills you needed for your particular role. So you weren't having to search in 20 different places again. So keep it simple. I'll probably say that on every slide. The next thing, so now you know about your skills, how do you actually develop your career? So this for us, and we spoke a bit about the one up, one across. Again, basing this on keeping it simple, we said the aim of a career path is to inspire someone. So based on your current role, what are the kind of roles you could go into? Again, I've gone into some organisations where I've seen incredibly intricate career paths that map out, if you want to go from a solution designer to a web designer, you need to do these 8 courses on these days, and you need to go and speak to that person. For us, that's the next step. The first step is for individuals to just know what's out there. I'm yet to go and speak to a BA that could describe what a systems analyst does, who could describe what a tester does in detail. So the first thing is sharing that knowledge about what other roles do. So we provided a couple of options for one up, which is promotion in effect, and some options for one across based on your current skill set and just most likely moves.
I think the other thing for me on there, and again, I think it was Tracy actually, giving people a really open and transparent process that says at some point there is no other career in your discipline in Telefonica. So if I'm a lead BA, that might not be something I can go to being a senior BA or whatever the explanation might be. And that gives people career choices that actually says we're giving you all the information you can possibly need to go out and say, well, I might want to look at a service delivery analyst as an example. Because there are transferable skills in those disciplines, but actually people think that they can just sit there and get the next natural promotion out of these career paths, and that's just not going to happen.
Yeah. Yep. And we're touching a couple of anecdotes towards the end, but this to me is, it looks really simple, but it can be incredibly inspiring for individuals that had no idea that they could make that kind of move. So that was a quick view of some of the tools we created. The next thing, and actually in my mind probably the most important thing, is the actual rollout and the embedding of this framework. So we've got a nice set of tools in there, but how do you actually get the message out? And the temptation is to just do a line manager cascade. But I passionately believe that is not the best and most effective way of doing it, because I think you've got to reach people individually, you've got to make sure they're getting the same consistent message, at least for day one, then you can focus on the line manager training. So over to Julie for Be Brilliant.
Okay. So we talked about Be Brilliant as our theme, and from the minute we started the piece of work to actually bring career paths and all of this to life, we used Be Brilliant as our strapline, and we wanted people to feel like it was a brilliant place to work, and we wanted them to feel like they'd got an association to the comms and the plan that we were delivering. But actually, what does it mean to me? I think, again, I feel like I've taken quite a lot of what Tracy said and put it in here, but it is important that they understand what's going to be different and what does it mean to me, how can it help me. If you go with a line manager cascade, don't always get that emotional insight into what it means. So we went with a Be Brilliant and Creative Comms, all about wouldn't it be great if, and tried to turn the language around to say, actually it got them to buy into the fact that actually next we're going to tell them to turn up somewhere and listen to Mark and I for a week. Which is quite daunting, actually.
It is.
You can go. So we took a slightly different approach. We said we will go out to the people, but in 1 week we went and saw 300 people over 5 locations and 20-something sessions. And so Mark and I actually could start to talk about each other's piece. But that became quite important because when Mark and Credis walked away, we'd got all the learning and development out of the process and the framework that we were putting in place. So we can carry that same message along now, which I think is really important. And the people actually did want us to go and talk to them. We've got places out in satellite sites that people never go and see them. And they always say it's all about the headquarters. So the emotional and the tie-in and the buy-in that you get for doing that, don't underestimate.
Yeah. Good. So one of the final things we're going to cover is, so this is all great, but what about the actual benefits? What was the output of this? So rather than reading through all of those, we're just going to give you a couple of the stories that we witnessed.
So I wanted to talk about a story where, at the period of rolling this out, we were going through an outsourcing opportunity with some of our IT guys. And we turned up to one session and there was a little lady sat in the corner going, "You can't possibly help me. Why are we doing this? Why are you making me sit here?" And we talked to her about the framework and what it could give. And actually I sat and had a conversation with her that said, we are giving you the gift, I think was what Rebecca said earlier, the gift of all the industry information that you can possibly need to take a choice of whether you go to the outsource provider or you go to the industry, and actually you've got everything you need to be successful. And she went away from that session, and I saw her about 6 months later on the outsource provider, and she said that was the best conversation I've ever had. It actually makes me feel really proud, because we'd given her what she needed.
Yeah. I think for me, the proudest day of my career is probably making someone cry, which sounds really bad, but bear with me.
It wasn't me.
I don't normally do this. It wasn't. So we actually used the SFIA-based framework we created for IT, and the rest of operations at Telefonica thought we want some of that as well. So we adapted the SFIA framework, which actually is surprisingly easy, but that's a sort of tale for another day, I think. But we rolled it out in areas like property and fraud and security. And we just said, actually, you do some of the same core skills. You still do strategy and planning no matter where you are. You've got to manage suppliers. You've got to manage projects. Whether you're dealing with an incident that's IT-related or property-related, the underlying skill set is the same. And the reason I made someone cry is I spoke to someone in the property team that had been in the same role for 20 years. And she said this is the first time in 20 years she'd ever realised that she had any transferable skills. And I was able to say to her, you're an amazing project manager, an amazing supplier manager. And it's just incredible, with a very simple framework like this, based on something like SFIA, how you really can inspire your workforce. So that was it. We're just going to leave you with passing things on some sort of top tips to take away. But good.
Lovely. Thank you very much for that.
Very quickly, you've talked about outsourcing, and over the last 10 years we've seen the skills of our organisations be kind of hollowed out. Can you say a little bit more about how SFIA kind of helped overcome that experience?
Do you want me to? Yeah. I think the way that we could approach it was, I'll use a BA as an example. We weren't outsourcing BAs as it happened, but you could tell somebody that if you wanted to go and explore a career outside, whether that was with the outsource provider or not, here are the skills, here are the professional capabilities, and actually in the 6 months that you've got to be choosing your next career, you can focus your learning and development in those areas to be truly successful. So they could then write the best CV with the skills and make sure they've got the experience to be really successful. And actually from an outsource provider point of view, having a conversation about, they'll probably have more career choices with an outsource than they would back in Telefonica for certain disciplines. So, you know, you can have quite a lot of conversation about, you've got to make your own choice, but we'll give you all this information to help you succeed. Because at the end of the day, we want them to succeed if they're supplier side or not. So it was really good. Does that answer the... Yeah?
Lovely. Thank you once
Okay,
again.
thank you.